somewhere.
Okay, tell him it was his fault. He wasn't here. I forgot for a second. Okay, I'll wait till everyone gets on. I knocked everybody off. Everyone's trying to get back on. So, sorry, I'm a little late. A little technical difficulty. So I just, today, I want to come back to something I promised I would talk about. But I'm going to come back to it. But just, I thought today was a sort of comical news. Someone in the shul had sent me, this piece today about some football player on the Philadelphia Eagles. Rob can probably fill us in on that. Is Rob here? Yeah. I forgot his name. Sean Jackson or something like that. Deshaun Jackson. So someone sent it to me, and about the double standard, and people talking about certain civil rights and things like that. But when Jews get castigated, suddenly the left is very quiet. And he sent me the famous. Someone sent me the famous Dvar about Shechem. The story about Shechem when they wanted to avenge the rape of Dinah. So Shimon and Levi went and first circumcised them, and then while they were weak, they decimated the male population of the city of Shechem. And all the Mefarshim asked, why did they do that? And he quoted, someone sent me the excerpt from, I think it's the Rabbi and the Kli Yakar, says because they wanted to make them Jews. If they'll make them to Jews, then they'll kill them. No one will say anything. You know what I mean? They said the tactic was you'll make the Shechem into give them Milah, and they say So when they'll decimate them and say who'd they kill? A bunch of Jews. No one's going to say anything. That's what someone told me today. But I thought it was comical. What I really thought was comical is this fellow. Again, he wrote the whole tirade. It was barely intelligible, but he quoted from some attributed to Adolf Hitler, which wasn't, but some other book called Jerusalem, and some hatred. But anyway, he spoke about the Jews dominating America and trying to promote their agenda, and this was the whole rant about it. But what I thought was comical was that they took him to task. Who took him to task? The owner of the team. And they say, and he sort of backtracked after he met, and he says he met with the two most important people in the team. The owner, whose name is Jeff Lurie, and the general manager's name is Howie Roseman. Both Yidden. I mean, one's a little more Yiddish than the other, but they're both fully Yidden. Who knows? Jeff Lurie might be an Anikel Arizal. Who knows? Arizal's last name was Lurie also. And it's just ironic. Here he was about it, and they proved to him, yeah, we do control it. You work for us, you make $1 million contract, you better behave or else, you lose your contract. So it's sort of comical here, and then he backtracked. So he's like everybody else. I mean, we're all in the same boat. It was just, I thought it was just a comedy that after he gives this tirade about against the Jews and white America and all that, these two Jews who were the owner and the general manager take him to task, and he backtracks and just sort of proves the point. But anyway, I thought it was comical. But I'm really not such a political commentary. Just on the face of it, it just seemed comical. But anyway, I want to share with you. The truth is, all seriousness aside, I mean, some foolish ball player, we don't have to take that serious. But there was, if you read the news in Canada, a bunch of students protested and made some derogatory remarks about, obviously instigated by Palestinians, about Jews, and more the world, whether it's the annexation that they're going against, or just in general, the expressions of anti-Semitism throughout Europe. It's really something that's astounding and can't be simply written off. I mean, something's going on. So I came across a beautiful, it's I usually on Tuesday, like I always say, it's my last licks on the previous parshas, Chukes and Bolok. So I came across a beautiful a quote. Someone interviewed the chief rabbi, the former chief rabbi of Israel, one of our favorite people, Yisrael Me'alau, and he makes reference to that famous pasuk that at one point in history it was sort of a lament, not as much as a expression of greatness. And Hein levadad yishkain ubagayim le'yischashav, the pasuk that Bilam said. Hein levadad yishkain. This is a nation that's isolated, sits alone, and bagayim le'yischashav, and the Goyim don't take any note of him. That's what the pasuk seems to imply. And at a certain time in history, that's how many of the Jews understood that pasuk as a lament and compelling us to change that we should become a nation among nations and find our own governance and our own land. And of course, the Medina Israel and everything that comes with it. But he says, and he quotes the Hamek Dvar, say this word, L'chvayt Rebetz, who's a big Hamek Dvar, the Netziv. The Hamek Dvar learns the pasuk, obviously, it's not just a lament. It's not just, oh, nebuch, heinam levad yishkain. He learns the pasuk like this, and this Rabbi loud quotes. He says, heinam, he says, hein, behold, if they are an am, in other words, if we stand proud of what we stand for, and we badad, we realize that what we stand for is of a different nature than what the rest of the world stands for. And we stand isolated because we realize that we have a credo and we have a system of law and a lifestyle that's very different than the rest of the world. Hein om levadad, then yishkain. Then we will stay around till eternity. Yishkain, we will dwell, we will rule, we will be present. But bagayim, but if we try and we're frustrated, and when the Goyim speak against us, we say, how could it be? We've got to, obviously we have to go through Shtadlis, but that's not where it really, we have to do what we have to do, but that's not the answer. The answer is bagayim. That's what we worry about. Lo yishchashav, they won't consider us. In other words, trying to fight for our rights is not going to do it. If we live hein am and levadad, and we are a nation, and we realize who we are, without having to kowtow, without having to answer or to complain or bemoan our faith, but have confidence and strengthen our appreciation of who we are and what we represent, despite what the idiots say, then Yishkain will have permanent. That's the Nesiv, a beautiful shot. Obviously, that's the essence of the pasuk. And then he quotes a famous medrash, which he says is almost like Chassidish Vertel, but it's a medrash. It says, Hein am levad Yishkain. It says Hein. The word Hein, the medrash points out, all letters in the aleph base, in the single digits, aleph through test. So if you pair each of the single digit, there's always, you can compare aleph with a tes, a beis with a ches, and you have a shleimus, two different letters. There's only two letters in the aleph base, both in the single digits and in the hundreds. So when you go from 10 and up, when you go to the high digits, and you match off a 10 with a 90 and a chaf with a pay, so you add up to 100. It's also shleimus. There are two letters that have no pair. That's hey and the nun. Because all the other letters, if you combine one on one end, one on the other, it makes shleimus 10. If you combine yud with sadi, it makes 100. Chaf with pay, you have is 20 and 80, and so on and so forth. There's only two isolated letters. Hey, who only has to find within himself. It's only the hey with the hey and the nun with the nun. When we're happy with who we are and we're happy with ourselves and we appreciate who we are without having to look for anyone to pair with, then hey noam levad yishkan, that's a medrash. And then he quotes in a beautiful story, and not a story, but a little vertel from a thought that the Ridvaz, Rabbi Yaakov David Vilovsky, he was a Rav in Europe. He was one of the great Gainim. He wrote a commentary on Yerushalmi that he's famous for, the Ridvaz. And he also was a Rav in Chicago. And eventually he made his way back, and he was a Rav, and he made Aliyah to Tzfas, and that's where he lived out his years. And in one of his Svarim, he writes the following thing. He says like this. He says, there are two mighty forces in the world. There's fire and there's water. Fire is very powerful. Water is very powerful. Each one of them has a unique characteristic. If you leave a pot on the fire filled with water, eventually the water will evaporate. The ash will cause the water to evaporate and disappear. Obviously, it will overpower the water, but because it just disappeared, it'll evaporate. And on the other hand, everyone knows that if you take a bucket of water and you throw it on the fire, so then the water will extinguish the fire. So which is more powerful, the ash or the mayim? So he says like this. He says, the answer is as follows. It depends. If you have a barrier, if you create a barrier between the fire and the water, then of course the fire is stronger. But without a barrier, the water conquers us. And he says, you find, the Pasuk says that Klal Yisrael is compared to Eish. Beis Yaakov, Eish, Beis Yosef, Lahava. Beis Yaakov is a fire, and Beis Yosef is a flame. And the other Amim are called Shoin Lu'umim Kshoin Mayim Kabirim, Pasuk in Yeshaya, that the force of the nation is like a mighty current of water that can inundate. So he says, the truth is, if we don't create the barrier, if we don't define ourselves, and we see ourselves as trying to kowtow, we're trying to fit in and meld into it, and don't realize how unique we are, live a unique lifestyle, then water is more powerful. But when you create a mechitza, when there's a mechitza, then fire certainly wins hands down over the water. And that's what he says. That's the bottom line. Heinam levadod yishkain. Heinam, when we're avad levadod, and we isolate ourselves, we create a barrier between us and all the things that the culture. We have to cancel the culture, not in that sense. We have to cancel the other culture. That's what it's called, cancel culture, I think it's called. And that's really what it's all about. And we live, the more we enthuse ourselves with the strength of Torah and our Messiah and all the things that are so important to us, and diminish our involvement in whatever it is of that world, and we create, the more mechitzas we create, the more powerful our impact, and our more we guarantee that the Eish will be goiver on the Mayim, and then Yishkain, we will be able to sustain and dwell and accomplish what we have to accomplish. So that was one thing I saw. And then I came across a beautiful thought. There was an interview with Rabbi Brudny. He's one of the up-and-coming Rosh Yeshivas. I mean, he's a man probably in his late 60s, early 70s. Very powerful, very, very insightful, very progressive in the realm of yeshiva world. He says it like it is, and very articulate and very thoughtful, and deals with major issues, kids at risk, and he's a hero. He's been a hero to many, many people. And Rabbi brings Rosh Yeshivas in the Mir Yeshiva in New York. And he said over the following story. He wanted, he's talking about the COVID and the manner, what we've been through, the loss. But on the other hand, to realize how good Hashem has been to protect us. I mean, the vast majority of us have withstood, and we're still healthy. And even though it was a Magefa, we have to be appreciated, even though we have to bemoan the loss of so many wonderful people, but we can't lose sight of all the Chazdei Hashem has done, even though life is difficult. Then he goes on to bring a little anecdote, which he wants to use to express the attitude we have to have and the mindset we should think about, because the world is losing it, and sometimes we also get a little despondent and depressed. And he wants to reiterate that people have to realize that we have a different perspective. Anytime something is going on that seems to disrupt that world, whereas the other world seems to crumble in its despondency and its fright and its fear, we have to realize we have a different perspective. In order to bring it home, he quotes a little story. I'm going to read it to you. A little thing that he discovered. He says, he writes that he once saw in the archives of the Russian police the record of when they imprisoned the Lubavitch Rebbe, not the previous, who he's known as the Friedricher, not the last one, the Nachum Mendel, but Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He was called the Friedricher Rebbe. In 1928, the interrogator wanted to get the Rebbe to reveal the names of his shluchim all over Russia. He was taken and he was imprisoned. It happened to be, interestingly, I just saw that today also, I saw that actually the one who blew the whistle and let people know that the Friedrich Lubavitch Rebbe was imprisoned and that they have to do everything to free him, which eventually was freed, was Rav Avram Yitzchak Chaim Cook. He was the one who apprised the Jewish community of what was going on and sort of led and put into motion the efforts to save him. And in 1929, the Friedrich Lubavitch Rebbe came to visit Hebron. There's a famous story. He traveled from Europe through Egypt, and he came in, and he happened to be in Hebron, and he went specifically, when many places he visited, and he went to give thanks, a personal thanks to Rav Avram Yitzchak Chaim Cook. And there's a whole story about what took place in that time and the conversation he had with him. And there's a lot of interesting artifacts about it and different notices that were put up that were authored by Rav Kook about the Lubavitch Rebbe. He called him a Tzaddik Niskov, Kadosh V'Tar. It's amazing, amazing history. And actually, he had gone to visit Hebron a day, I think, before the massacre. He had left. He had left on the train hours before the massacre took place. Strange circumstances, and mamish, how, a minute, he could have been a victim, and yet he was saved. And, obviously how history works out, and you see, when you look back, the different cogs that turn and the sprockets that interact, that make things happen, and just a fascinating piece of history. At any rate, we're not getting too sidetracked. So the Lubavitch Rebbe, they had this direct. It says the interrogator wanted to get the Rebbe to reveal the names of his shluchim all over of Russia. This was, 1929. The sheikhdim, the malamdim. So he took out a gun. The interrogator, maybe he was a Jew. A lot of communists were Jews. He says he took out a gun to threaten the Rebbe, and he said, "The Rebbe zet der Tatzke." I'll say in Yiddish, just so all of us who love Yiddish. The Rebbe zet der Tatzke. Does the Rebbe see this Tatzke? Means this toy. He says, "Die Tatzke hat schon gemacht, asach Menschen reden." This toy has made a lot of people speak. And the Rebbe answered him, and he said in the following: "Der Tatzke hat an Hashpah auf eine, was hat nur ein Welt und hat nicht ein Gott. Aber eine, was hat ein Gott und hat zwei Welten, die Tatzke hat nicht kein Hashpah auf ihm." Which means, this toy can affect only someone who has one world and doesn't have one God. But one who has one God and two worlds, this toy cannot affect. It's amazing. It's an amazing thought. Listen, we know there's this world and the other world. We got to do what we got to do, but there's nothing ever ends. And it's never despondency because, we've got to make our choice. We've got to do what's right. And whether it's this world or the other world, we're here forever. And a Jid never forgets that. Wir haben ein Gott und zwei Welten. And he says, and he writes, he once heard a machshava that when a father puts on a kittel on the Seder night, this Rosh Hashiva says, Rabbi Brudny, he is a real Ben Chayrin, he is free. Because he declares, I am not afraid of a kittel in which a nifter is dressed for burial. I have two worlds and I have one God. That is a true Ben Chayrin. And that's what he says, there is corona for the rest of society and a different corona for us. Sadly, the rest of society knows of only one world and they don't recognize that there is only one God. For them, corona is terrible and everything else that's going on and disastrous, the panic, the mayhem, the dread. We are so fortunate. We know that there are two worlds and one creator. We all want to be healthy. We all want to live. We know that the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the world and he knows what he is doing. Even though our community tragically lost over 1,000 lives, including Gedolim and Tzaddikim and Anshe Chesed, it is never a dead end. It is not oblivion. It is our loss, not theirs. The Tzaddikim have passed on from this world to an Olam Shekulei Tov. So we have to understand that two different coronas were taking place in the world. The corona of the general public and the corona of Achenu B'nai Yisrael. And remember always, so ein Gott und zwei Welten. Nothing ever to despair. We got to do what we got to do and obviously preserve our mission, our lives, our health, and that's our job for sure. But that's an amazing, amazing, amazing. Hey, Nam Levad Yishkain. And if we live like that, then we realize that we have to remain loyal and to the Ein Gott. And hopefully we'll stay in both worlds and we'll have a sojourn in this one and hopefully make it to the next one, not sooner than we want to get there, but we never have to despair. And that's a great chizuk. It's a very great chizuk. I was very mischazik from here reading both these and I'm sharing it with everyone. And I hope that, we don't get perturbed. Obviously we worry about, anti-Semitism reactions but we also have to remember even when we react and we have to go through the motions of protecting ourselves and going through the shtadlus, but it's never about the shtadlus. It's about what we got to do and what we have to remain loyal. We stand alone and we know who we are and we have zwei Welten und ein Gott. We're good. Mit Hashem. Okay, everybody, that's it for tonight. That's the way it was, as he says, right? That's the way it was. I got it right this time. And as Rob says, that's all, folks. And the Mitzvah Shem will continue.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening. It's really always wonderful to see good friends and share Chizuk and just see smiles around the room. It's just wonderful. Really, really special. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi
Thank you.